Hey guys, it's John, and I am very, very excited this evening. I am talking tonight with Kim Carey. As you could probably see her right over there, she just popped in there. Kim and I have an interesting background that I don't think she really knows the full scope of. And so I want to tell a quick story about Kim and how we kind of connected at a very specifically perfect time in my life. So let me give a little background to the story. In the year 2000, I had my first past life regression after 19 psychics told me. Most of you guys know this story already. And I ended up becoming a speaker for the Association for Research and Enlightenment, also known as the Edgar Cayce Foundation. And I spoke in Virginia Beach and in Portland and in Houston. And I spoke at Unity churches and metaphysical centers all over the country. There was a book written about me called John of Old, John of New. All this stuff. And I was going out and I was hitting the centers, doing private sessions at each one of the centers I went to. And I was all over the country doing all kinds of crazy things. But the next year I went around on tour again, and I would come back to these same places and I would see all the same people with all the same problems. And I began to realize that they were more interested in who I was rather than what I was saying and teaching and talking about. And I realized that I was becoming a crutch or a sideshow. Let's go see John again. He was so cool. And all of my teachings, everything that I talk about is all about the idea of them empowering themselves and coming into their own divinity. And so to me, it was really important to do that. So I decided to stop. And I literally stopped doing that sort of spiritual side of my career for a decade. And I decided what I was going to do is I was going to take the lessons and try to spread them in a place that didn't have a choir, because when you speak at metaphysical centers and Unity churches, you're preaching to the choir. Yeah. So what I did was I rewrote all of my lessons into a more acceptable vocabulary, and I started doing corporate speaking. So what I was doing was I was teaching the same principles, but I was teaching them without the reincarnation story. And I went off and I did that. And I was very successful doing that. I did very well doing that. Well, during that time, I met my co-host in crime on the Spirit Cafe podcast. She hates when I call her that. My affable amigo, let me call her that. Tamara Zoner. And I said, Tamara, I saw her and I had met her during one of those speeches, and there was something about her that was really special. I didn't know what it was. Did not see her again for about 4 years. But when I saw her again was on LinkedIn. I ran across her profile and I decided I should interview her for my corporate podcast, because I had one of those back in those days. And so I brought her on and I ended up talking to her for about an hour and a half before the event, we interviewed. And suddenly at the end of the conversation, I ended up telling her my entire reincarnation story that I hadn't told in a decade. So next thing you know, I said, we should start a podcast. So she and I started a podcast. So then we started looking for guests. Well, I had been watching Kim Carey on YouTube, Intuitiveiw. I am an intuitive viewer, people. That's me, right? Right?
The confession.
Yeah. Don't hold it against me. Right? And so I am an intuitive viewer. So I said, let's see if Kim would come on. And so I reached out to Kim, and Kim graciously said she was going to come on. So she came on, and in our interview with Kim on the Spirit Cafe podcast, I offhandedly mentioned reincarnation and said I had a reincarnation story, and I completely blew it off. And I was like, I'm just not going to go there, right? And then we got off the interview, and Kim says, so tell me about the reincarnation story. Right? So same thing. All of the information, blah, 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 just started pouring out of me, because there's something about Kim, something about this was a good place to do this, and this was the right thing to do this. So it was, I think 1 or 2 weeks went by, and I get an email from Kim saying, I'd like to interview you on my channel. You can talk about reincarnation. You can share as little or as much as you'd like. And I said, well, okay. And I was a little trepidatious at first, but I I checked in with my sources and I asked, and I was told, yeah, it's time. It's time to come back out.
Right.
And so on September 9th, which was the day before the interview with Kim on her channel aired, I started the YouTube channel. I literally started it on September 9th. On September 10th, I had me, my sister, Tamara Zoner, and my friend Holly were my only subscribers on my YouTube channel. I had my interview with Kim Carey on the 10th. The next day, I had over 300 subscribers.
Oh, that's great.
Overnight.
That's great.
Now, here's where it gets a little weirder, Kim. So in 2001, I had the website John of Peniel, but my email for some reason was John of New. I owned both domains, and I kept my John of New email. So when I went into the corporate world, I got rid of all those domains, all those email addresses, everything. The day that I put up the new website to go with the YouTube channel, which was the 9th, I bought John of New again that day on GoDaddy and set up the John at John of New email again. And on the 11th, the day after that interview, I got a reply to an email that I had written 9 years earlier. That never should have found me. And the email went something like this. Hi, John. I had a reading with a psychic in Hawaii, and she told me that I needed to reach out to you. And I was like, okay. She says, yeah, can we set up a time? So I pushed her over to my private sessions that I do, because I didn't have no idea what this was. And so she signed up for a private session. I get on the phone with her. She calls this psychic and gets a reading for the 11th of September, the day after our interview. The psychic says, you need to find John. He's a big, bald man with glasses, and he was John, the beloved apostle. She says, I know him. I had a reading with him 9 years ago. She says, yeah, he's got information for you. And
what in the world?
Yeah. And I'm like, okay. So so now, first of all, I never should have gotten a reply to an email that I'd written 9 years earlier. It's not the way the internet works, right?
Right.
So she gets a hold of me. We have a conversation, and I am somebody who does not verify past lives for people.
Right.
I just don't, because I've met like 25 Mary Magdalenes. People,
right.
they all think they're Mary Magdalene, right? And so I'm like, I don't verify. That's your journey. If that feels right to you, follow it. That was the first time I had verified a past life in a decade. And I knew that this person, and I will not out her, and it is a woman. It is a woman. Yes. But she remembered being the brother of Jeshua, Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And she had a lot of personal guilt for letting him down. But it was one of the very, very rare times. But this happened the day after Kim Carey of Intuitiveiw pushed me out into the world again.
That is incredible.
Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing.
So I am forever grateful for you, because this coming back out has been one of the most beautiful and loving things I think I've ever experienced. I get beautiful emails every day from people telling me how much I'm changing their lives. And
that's great.
I have a community who's commenting with each other, and I'm getting them talking to each other. And I'm hearing people tell me stories about how they're empowering themselves. It's just, and you were a major part of the impetus of that. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome, John. I'm so happy to hear that. I really am. And that's amazing. And I, echo what you found, that these, the communities we're building are amazing. Loving people, trying to help each other find our way through this crazy world right now. We're all clinging together and doing it, but I echo that. I also get amazing emails and comments, and people are you know, I think people are so good and trying so hard, you know. Of course, you can look at the negative and the, you know, the people out there that are doing their best to be horrible.
Mm,
Luckily, in my daily life, and probably in yours as well, I see the good all the time.
yeah. And even in
It
those
really
people,
is
even
true.
in those people who are so negative, I literally look at them as people who are in fear. I mean,
Absolutely.
they're mistaking power for love, and God is love, and so they're kind of addicted to the wrong feeling, and they're going down these paths. And you know, there's a famous Socrates quote: "When the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser."
Mm,
And you think about what they're all doing. They're all name calling right now, which is slander,
yeah.
right? They're
Yeah.
terrified. They're terrified because they're losing grip because there's more of us than there are of them.
Yeah.
Right? It's beautiful.
Hmm. That's exactly right. I think, and you know, I keep telling, you know, something, and a message I keep getting, but I keep telling, you know, people that whatever it looks like, whatever it happens the day to day, we're not going back. We're
Right.
moving forward. We're evolving. We're spiritual beings evolving, and you can't stop evolution. It's going to happen. It's happening. It's going to happen. And so, um, you know, there isn't anything to fear. You know, this is just we are moving forward, and you know, I hope that the majority of it happens in my lifetime, but that's my ego talking.
Right. Right.
Of
Well,
course, I want to
and
see it.
well, I think a lot of people forget that we live in a predominantly positive world already. And
Right.
you know, the story I often tell is this: if I had a job in Cleveland, which is a half an hour north of here, and I commuted to work, I'd pass 1,000 cars every day on the way to work. And once a day, I might see a car broken down on the side of the road or have a fender bender. Right. Tonight on the news, what's going to be on there? The fender bender.
Right.
Right. And I'll probably pass 1,000 cars every day. And so what should be on the news is the miraculous fact that 999 cars made it safely to work with no problem whatsoever.
Right.
Right, right. Our world is 99.9% positive, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the news peddles the fear, and the news peddles the anxiety because it gets them ratings, and you know, and they're all striving for it's a business as well. But
Right.
when I see all the fear based, but then I look at little things that don't get the big coverage, like the fact that a couple of days ago, General Motors said that by 2030 they're going to be entirely electric cars.
Oh, that's amazing.
I mean, that's
That's
an
great.
a huge, but it's not what's making it on the news today. The Dow is down.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, right.
Exactly.
It's a
Exactly.
miraculous thing, you know. And I think about the technologies that we've experienced. My grandmother was born in 1903 on the day the Wright brothers first flew.
Oh.
Right. And right now, as you and I talk on this thing, there's a robot crawling around Mars that we sent there.
Right.
I mean, just in this brief 3 generations, we have gone from horse-drawn carriages to Mars. And
Right.
and all of those things are creating new opportunities and more, you know, and I really think that it's all leading us towards a much more beautiful future and a solution for pollution. What's that one company that they I forget what it is. They make wristbands, right? You buy a wristband and it cleans up X amount of the ocean. And what they're doing is they're going out and they're harvesting the plastic that's in the ocean and they're recycling it into bracelets.
Oh gosh.
How about a beautiful thing, right?
Right. Right.
They're making
Yeah.
money and the environment's getting clean. And I think there's a lot of people out there doing that sort of thing. And
I think so
changing.
too. And you know, something that I've gotten, so, and it's always amusing to me when I get like information from my guides. For people that don't know, I get information from guides and I share it. But but when I get science stuff or medical stuff, because I have no knowledge, so I'm just I literally say exactly what I see because I have no idea. And one message that has been consistent is that we're not only going to shift our behavior with our how we connect and participate with the environment, but we are going to invent our way out of a lot of these problems. And one thing I saw, and I remember it was so weird, and somebody just sent me an email. I mean, Mike, I forget all this stuff. And so my viewers are very good at sending me things like, look, you said this and this happened. I'm like, I did say that? That's weird, because I remember that.
I've had that exact same experience. Somebody come back and say, you said this, and I remember it from the recording. No.
I'm so glad they keep track, because I don't keep track. But
well, let me ask this.
Yeah,
good. No, do your
it was a thing that they're inventing right now that they've discovered an actual organism that actually eats plastic. And I remember seeing something that was like, I was like, it like eats away the plastic. And I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if it's a machine or if it's I don't know what this is, but it like absorbs and eats plastic.
Right.
And I forgot about it, but they sent me the thing, and I'm like, this is what. But to me, it just gives me such hope. We're gonna figure this out. We really, really are. And So, what were we gonna say, John?
Well, I was going to take you off topic, which is why I wanted you to continue.
Yeah.
You were talking about how people come and you don't remember the information, but when you do your readings, you doodle while you do your readings, right? You kind of like sketch on your paper, right?
Sometimes I sketch. Sometimes I just. I'll show you something in just a second, but usually I'm just squiggling. Yeah. Sometimes it will end up being a picture, but I don't realize it. Sometimes it has more meaning than I think it does. Okay. But yeah.
Yeah. I reason I ask is because I channel, and I'll have to tell you the story about how that all started for me, because it was a very interesting process that I went through. But one of the things that happened in the process of channeling is I have to close my eyes to do it, because I feel like I have to shut off my physical world self to tap into that information. Do you find that you're drawing and scribbling or whatever it is you're doing is distracting your mind so that you can hear better?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's doing. It's putting me in kind of because as you know, when you and I think channeling even more so, but when you read, it's kind of like on a normal level you're here, but when you read, you're kind of just here. You're you just shift. There's something that you shift into, and the scribbling, I kind of just concentrate on that, and it helps the thinking mind to kind of shut off and just be open. It allows me just to kind of open that channel. Right. And so it's just, it's a distraction. It's just to kind of, same thing when you close your eyes, you're kind of shutting yourself off, or kind of just, allowing your mind to shut down.
Let me tell you how this channeling thing happened to me first. I think you might find this really interesting. I used to do a lot of private healing sessions. And for me, there's, in the book of John, it says, there is no fear in perfect love. And I think the process of healing is to expose them to perfect health or perfect love. And nothing will happen until that person has faith or belief in it. It's their faith that heals them, what the Bible says too. So for me, it's always been about coming to that space. Well, I've also firmly believed that it comes through how the person believes it will.
Right.
And so I was sitting there in a session right in Canton, Ohio, just south of here, actually. And I was doing my normal healing sessions like I always do, which is really about convincing them of their health and getting them very present on faith about it. And I started seeing this pure white light right next to this person. And it took the form of a body, of a person standing next to them. And I'm sitting there and I'm experiencing this, and it's like freaking me out. And I literally felt myself almost pressed aside, like almost pushed out. And a voice came through that was not my voice, different accent, referred to itself as Gabriel, which later on I did some research, and that's the archaic way of saying Gabriel.
Oh,
right?
wow. Uh-huh.
And I did this whole session as this Gabriel character. Well, I channeled Gabriel privately with a group of friends for about a year. And it was like, we would come together, we're like, we should really explore this and see what this is. Well, over the course of the year, Gabriel stopped referring to me in third person. He started referring to me as us.
Okay.
And it started with, he would say, John I, and he was tying in John I. And then after that had went on for several weeks, one of the people in the group says, so why are you saying John I? And he says, the answer was, we're all one. Everything is one. And the reason the various personalities and entities come through channelers is because they are not comfortable with their own divinity. They can't bring the information through themselves in a way that they feel comfortable being the messenger of it. And so it comes through with this character that you speak through so that you can separate yourself. He says, what's happening with John, this is what Gabriel is saying, Gabriel I, right, is saying, is that I was becoming comfortable with just letting it flow through me. And over the course of time, the character of Gabriel went away, and I would just close my eyes and talk. And what happens now is, if you go to my channel, you'll look up any of the videos that say, I opened up and asked. And literally all that is me closing my eyes, exhaling, and just letting it come through. And it just blah, 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 pours out of my mouth. But to me, it was really fascinating how, when I was going through the process of Gabriel, there was an experience in that took me back to my regression. In my regression, when Jeshua touched my heart and I felt that pure loving energy, that pure unconditional love, the next important moment was what the regressionist says. You go to the next important moment. Next important moment was being back in my physical body and feeling all my fears and anxieties, and feeling the separation. When I would struggle with the Gabriel thing, when I would end a session, I would weep and cry because I would feel all of that anxiety come back into my body again. I don't have any of that issue anymore. And it's really fascinating. Now it's like, okay, what am I going to do? I asked the question straight up, and then I let go and just let the hairs stand up on my arms, and hair doesn't stand up here anymore.
That is so, it's you surrendered to it. You let it in. And I think, that story is so, it's so, our humanness is so, it's questions, which it's very questioning, right? Why is this happening? What is this happening to me? Who is this? What, but also that ego part of us, that is kind of like, who do I think I am telling this stuff, when in actuality, we all know all this stuff. But it's in this human form, we feel so separate and so small. And so I only know this much. I only know as much as I just went to, just this much college and this much, we put it in such
right.
small little, it's like, who am I to know all this, universal information, or give this advice, or say, but it's in all of us somewhere. And it sounds like that entity that was actually part of you and your knowledge and your understanding, that's the way it had to come through to let you know this already. It's in you. It's right there. It's in you. And that's a great story for all of us to understand, that we all have it in us. It's that human part of us that's like, I think we're so limited, that think we're just this small, and that we're just encased in this. That's all we are. John, I have a story that I I can't remember where I talked about it. I think it was in an interview that I did, but it was a story about a funeral that I went to. And it was my mother's, my mother and father's cousins. It was actually my dad's cousin. It was his wife. And they would always do things together. They were, four peas in a pod. They would vacation together, go on cruises together. And my dad had passed away. And now his cousin's wife was passing away. So it left his cousin and my mom. And we went to this funeral. And while I was sitting there, they started to play some music. And it was very sad and very, just very melancholy, because more people in that generation in our family were starting to pass away. And as I sat there, I could feel her spirit enter the room. And it was this huge auditorium, and it just filled the room. And I felt it. I could feel it. And I was looking around to see, like, is anybody else feeling this? Because she's everywhere right now. She is filling this room with her love and just appreciation, and also just kind of like, I'm part of all this. I'm part of you. I'm here, and thank you, and I love you. She was doing all this in this moment, and I was just like looking around, saying, am I the only person that can feel this? But it reminded me, and it allowed me to feel and understand how big we are, how our spirit is huge. It's not this tiny little thing that's encased in this body. It's not the smallest part of us. It is huge, and we're encased in this physical form to have an experience. We have to be in this form to have an experience here that's very limited and very extreme, and very focused. We have to do it this way, but our spirits are huge.
Right.
And I don't think we understand how connected, like you said, how connected we are truly, but how big and amazing our spirits are. But that is a kind of like, the story that you told. It was one of those moments where I was like, I get it. I get it. I get it. Beautiful story. And it reminds me very much of my mom. My mom, I told you before in our interview, my mom had her master's degree in liturgy, was head of liturgical doctrine at my Catholic church. And so she was a very Catholic woman. And I asked her one day, I said, Mom, why did you become so Catholic? And she said, I had an out-of-body experience during a mass. She says, I raised up out of my body, and I looked around, and I saw several other people up out of their bodies as well. And we were all facing the altar. Gosh.
To her, it was a big spiritual experience, right?
Right.
Well, to dive into what you said, though, to jump into a different perspective a little bit. Right now, we started this conversation about how we're advancing, the humanity is advancing. Edgar Cayce, back in the 40s, said that there was going to be new science that would bridge the gap between spirituality and science. And Edgar Mitchell, coming back from space, started noetic science because he had a transcendental experience. And what's really fascinating when you look at Einstein and all of his studies, he discovered that in an atom, it is 99.999% a pure energy event. And 0.0001 of that is actually physical. Right? Now, what's really fascinating about that statement is, right now you're looking at a camera or a screen or, across, and that camera is made of atoms. And the air that you're looking at through to see that camera is made of atoms. And then the trippiest part is your eyes are made of atoms, right? And so is that person next to you. And so is this. And Einstein said that when he discovered how perfect everything was organized, he began to believe in what he called the God of Spinoza. He didn't believe in a a religious God. He believed in a higher consciousness God that had some, involvement. Now, we talked about the idea of people stepping into their power, their divinity, and
Right.
Jeshua. I call him Jeshua. Most people know him as the other name Jesus, right? I call him Jeshua. He's in the Bible. He says, "I'm the Son of Man." Now, what he meant by that was, "I'm just like you. I'm a son of a man." He also said, "You are the children of God," right? And so he basically was, and he's, "Greater works than I have done, you will do." And he washed his disciples' feet to show that he was no better than them. He kept proving over and over again that what he was experiencing was something we all can do. We all have that ability. And what I find really interesting is that the concept of son of God and children of God, it's the same thing, only one of them actually stepped into the role. Because a son of God, I'm a son of God if I'm one of God's children, right? I'm a man, right? At least I hope so. Last I checked, right?
Yep.
So it really comes down to, we all have to step into our own power, our own divinity, our own thing, and I think that's what's happening right now. And the thing that's really I'm writing a book right now, which I'm planning on coming out this fall. It's called The Recovering Catholic's Guide to Spirituality.
Oh, I love it.
Right? And I just think it's a needed book. But what I found out was, the almost 4,000 people subscribed to my channel, 90% of them are female over 60 who are Reformed Catholics.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And they talk about being a recovering Catholic every day in my chat boards, right?
Oh my gosh.
It's fascinating to me, right? And then when you dive back and you look at the iconography that we all follow, most of it comes from medieval Catholicism. Like the idea of the devil with horns and goat legs, that is from Dante's Inferno, written in 1300. Before that time, there wasn't any of that, but so it was very Catholic. So a lot of the iconography that has been spread across the world has come from these underlying beliefs given to the world from Catholicism. And to me, it's fascinating how so many people are resonating with you and me and people who are out there just opening up and letting our hearts talk, and how they're going, "My God, this is exactly what I thought for so long, but I haven't been able to say it." Right? It's like you and I give them permission to step into their divinity and to put the Gabriels down and become one with their source and one with their wall. So I love that story, because you're basically verifying that, yes, she came back and she was everywhere in the room.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's funny. We were just talking about this exact thing, my sister and I, because we grew up in the Mormon church, and again, a very, I don't say extreme, but it definitely has its very rigid beliefs, very, very rigid, like a lot of, religions are. And she was saying how, and I think that, with, especially, with Jesus, so many of the things that he said, because we're so limited in our thinking, and we're so linear, and we're so earthly, that we put everything so literal. And with the idea of the Son of God, it doesn't, he put it in terms we would understand, because we're human, and we understand children, we understand father, we understand. But she and I were talking about how you'd hear that idea of God is everywhere, and as a kid, or in church, you'd be like, how is that possible? Like, he's here and he's here and he's the tree and he's this, and it's not. It isn't that. It's that he is his essence is everywhere. It isn't. It's the what he his essence and his you can see him in everything.
Yeah. Well, life, I'm glad you said it that way, because I go back to Einstein talking about atoms, right? But there's another line in the Bible when you pair it with that scientific response, you get a whole new thing. created in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you see, and that 99.999% of energy is God.
Right.
And when they say that he's a tree, he is the rock, he is everything. But the interesting thing is, one of the common truths that you find all over the place is that our thoughts are creating this outer image, this outer experience. Buddha says, what you think you become, you create your world. Krishna said, you are the culmination of your thought. The Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. You know, the philosopher Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And even Shakespeare said, there's nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Right. And so our thoughts are creating in this experience. And it really comes down to each person stepping into their present moment self and their identity of self. The problem is this is my opinion, the majority of the world gets lost in their subconscious belief. And the most famous Buddhist quote ever is, life is suffering. But when you actually translate it correctly, it has a very different meaning, because Pali, the original language, is a conceptual language and English is a literal language. And when they translate it from Pali, the word dukkha, which is the word for suffering, gets translated in 3 different ways. But when you take the 3 different ways and you combine them into the concept, like Pali would, the language of Pali would, what you get is life is suffering because of our habitual responses to our subconscious belief. We're in habit from our beliefs. And then you jump over to what Joshua said again. He says, be born again, set down your subconscious belief and start creating new present moment beliefs. And, you know, to me, that's where we need to, and I don't like even like using the word need. We need to example, people like you and I example being open in the present moment to love and expressing it so freely. And, you know, we attempt to shine our light so bright that people go, "Ooh, I want that." You know, I want to be like them, right? It's like that Harry met Sally moment. I'll have what she's having, right? right. I think that's what people like you and I and Celtic Tarot Sheila. I think she's got a lot of that same thing as well. You know, so many of the people that I've met over the time, and I think that's really the key is people have to make their own leap. But the only way they make the leap is if people like you and I and Sheila and so on and so forth actually be the example. And I think that's kind of, and that sounds so egotistical to say. And, you know, and in reality, all it is we're just trying to do our best and being loved most of the time, because everybody's going to screw up sometime, you know.
Exactly. Well, and and it's so interesting because that what you're talking about when you're talking about and you put it, you know, you have a huge brain, John. You have all this stuff in there, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I think I know that. But
well, hang on. Let me. I recently had my horoscope read, and when they read my horoscope, and it was on a podcast, and she says you have this Gemini intellect tied into, I forget what the other one was, Sagittarius or something. She says, you like retain information and then you use it like weapons. It comes out right when you want it to come out. And I was like, yes, I do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's brilliant. But I'm like, I can fill volumes with what I don't know. That's what I feel like. So
yeah, but you open up and you get all this information. And that, I mean, that you have that, what you're tapping into, in my opinion, is the Akashic records. You're tying into the oneness of everything and tying it. So I think when you channel, it's much like I channel. We're actually tapping into the oneness of everything and everyone.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I was cutting you off. But you were going somewhere.
No, I just think with the what you were talking about is that when we get into, it's interesting because in I have a club called Intuit Club, and that's all we do is spiritual stuff, because I just felt like there needed to be I kept getting the message that this was the year a lot of things were coming to a head, and people needed to get grounded. And I just felt like, oh, okay, what's coming? So let's have a kind of another group where we can just talk about spiritual things and dig in a little more deeply. And so we do a book club. And so we do this kind of stuff. And so, but what has been interesting is every other week I do a meditation. It's only about 10 or 15 minutes and a message. And so many of the messages have been tied to letting go of stuff, getting rid of old baggage, getting rid of grievances, letting the past go, forgiving people, a lot of that stuff. And what you're talking about when you talk about this is that conditioned mind, that conditioned thinking, getting trapped in the human brain. And I know Eckhart Tolle talks about it, that the evolution we're going through as spiritual beings is using the mind as a tool rather than letting it rule us the way that it does. We went from that animal kind of, I don't know who I am, but I'm just here. And then we went into I'm here and I don't know why and what's going on. And we've been in that for a very long time. And now we're evolving out of that into more of a remembering we are spiritual beings in a physical form. And we use our minds when we want to. It doesn't rule us the way it has. We're aware of our own thinking. Oh, that's my thought process again. I was just talking to my husband about this because he's taking a break from work. He's been working for 30 years and he's like, I'm burned out. And I'm like, take a break. He's taking a break, but I'm sure he doesn't care if I share this, but
Hope not. Adam, I'm sorry if that's the case.
But
this is all Kim. Sue her, don't sue me.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. But I told him, be aware of your thinking process, because what's going to happen is that conditioned thinking of, if I don't work, I'm lazy. If I don't have a job, I'm not fulfilling anything. Who am I if I don't have a job? I don't, and just being aware of that, you have shifted into a different consciousness, because that awareness is who you are. That's the real you. That's your spirit. The thinking, the conditioned patterns, that's just our brain. That's it.
Right. I think the interesting thing you just said that you said, who am I? Right.
Yeah.
And am I is the exact opposite of what Moses said God's name was. Right. And so Moses said God said his name was I am when he talked to the burning bush. Right. Mm-hmm. So whatever you ask in God's name is granted. So if you are asking, who am I, you're actually asking for the opposite of what you really want. If that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of like, who am I is questioning it. Who am I is this. And what we need to do is step into the I am.
Right.
Living a joyful, happy, fulfilling life that's abundant and fun. Yeah.
And I think that's true. And this is, I think that, we see, clearly there is a lot of drama going on, and there's always drama going on, whether it's, in our personal lives or collectively. But, and I talked recently about greater order. We kind of have to get the big picture, because it's all okay. We go on, this is just an experience. It's an experience. It's to learn, it's to grow, it's to, have the experience of being here. And also, I think some of us are here as light workers, or whatever you want to say, spreaders of, good news, but kind of these people that are kind of supposed to remind you, remember, you're the spirit. Don't get locked into this human form. That's what we're doing, right? In so many, in a lot of words, or so many words, we're doing that. And I think some of us are here to do that. But we're all here to have this human experience. So I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to get stuff wrong. I have to translate it still. So I'm,
I love that you keep using the word experience, because I think that's why we're here anyways, just for experiences. And I often liken it to deep sea diving, right? We drop down in here and we're down here for so long. Eventually we have to go back And every 16 hours, we fall asleep because we have to go back to a different state of consciousness so that we can deep sea dive again the next day. Right. Right. So we go back up, we recharge, we get the nitrogen out of our system, and we dive back down into the physical. Right. And then we're down here and we're having our experiences and we're doing our thing. And then, and we know it's got to be in that direction. It can't be we're here and we go there. It's got to be there and we come here, because if you tried to stay awake for 3 or 4 days, you're going to pass out at some point. Right. It's going to happen. You're going to go back. Right. That's the natural state. So to me, I look at it from the idea of we come here. Now, for me, my personal belief, and I respect everybody's beliefs, it's a personal journey as far as I'm concerned. Each one of us was find our own path. I believe we're here to experience our fears and anxieties and our separation, because there's the baseline to experience love from all different angles. Sometimes we experience it by not being loving. Sometimes we experience it by not being loved. Sometimes we experience very traumatizing separation from love, and sometimes we get these very simple little snarkiness or sarcasm that hurt our feelings. I think it's a varying degrees. When we come across here, we experience all these different kinds of love, which is why I think when people talk about near-death experiences, they go across and they have the life review, and the first thing they'll tell you is that they not only had the life review, but they experienced it from other people's points of view. They were experiencing, and so you're going over and you're experiencing love from all angles, from giving it and taking it and experiencing it. And I really often say that if God is love, the perfect thing that God could do, the consciousness of God, which is, in my opinion, all of us, the oneness of us, is allow ourselves to feel that separation so that we can know and appreciate love more fully.
Absolutely.
To me,
that's exactly right.
And I think it's one of the things that my regression said, and I think this kind of ties into this, is it said it's so simple that we have a hard time understanding it. And just be loving and do loving things. And that's why you and I coined the phrase in the first interview, live loving. And now I have T-shirts and mugs and everything else to say "live loving" on.
Live loving,
which I think is great, right? I think it's beautiful, right? I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And you're right. It gets a lot of this gets it. A lot of there's a lot of drama and distraction, and the messages get lost. But it is so basic and so simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, on a Kim Carey personal level, are you doing private sessions again or no?
I don't do like readings. I'm just doing mentoring. And again, even though you're in this arena or you enter at a certain place, you still kind of evolve and change and kind of see where you think you fit best. And for me, I've been a teacher for so many years. And as I learned this, I just felt like there was a need for people to kind of demystify this and what it is, and that people can do it too. It's not, we all come in with a connection to the divine. We just, we're the ones, I always say, we're the ones that turn away from it. It never turns away from us. We just have to turn back and realize, oh, this is how I do this, or this is how I connect, or this is my dominant ability or whatever. And so we've been teaching classes, and then I do private mentoring. And really the mentoring sessions are like this. We can talk about spiritual things. If they are like, I had this dream and I don't know if it was a message or if it was this, and I have that extra little connection I can plug into so I can find these things out. But that's what I feel like it's just a better fit for me right now. And that may change again, but
I loved how you were so public with that. How you're like, I'm doing readings, and you're like, I'm not sure. I loved it because it was like, here's Kim honoring her authentic self and how she feels about something. And I often say the connection to source is a feeling, not a thinking. Right.
Yes.
It's
absolutely.
Like everyone always forgets that in the Garden of Eden story, their big sin was they ate from the tree of knowledge.
Right.
They got in their head and out of their heart. Right.
That's right. That's right.
So for me, one of the things that I missed when I left doing the work all those years ago was I liked those one-on-one private sessions. And so I got really inspired to go back and do them again. And now I do them all the time. And what's really interesting was the first time I came back to do one, I'm doing them all on Zoom now, right? Of course.
Right.
So it's easier, right? But I said, how do I do that? Because I always used to be in the room, holding their hands, doing that work one-on-one, and how do I do that? And so I sat down to do my first one. I was like, I'm one of those guys who's always early, right? So like I go, well, if I'm going to be on a Zoom meeting, I'm on usually 20 minutes early because I want to get on, make sure.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no. Nobody lives at the speed of John. Right? I come on, I get on early. I make sure my headset's working,
Right.
and all my lights are good and everything. And I'm just more comfortable with that being done. Right.
Yep.
So I'm sitting here and I'm waiting for that first reading that I'm going to do after a decade of not doing one.
Oh, right.
And I took this pad and I put it in front of me and I wrote the person's name on it in case I got notes. And then I started automatic writing. And I wrote like a page of information for this person that I was about to read for. And so now when I do a private session, when you book me, there's always an hour. You can't book me an hour before any session because now I sit down and I automatic write for every session.
Oh, wow.
And I write and sometimes it's a page, sometimes it's two. And what I find most fascinating is how accurate they've been. One of the women that I was reading for, I kept quoting Robin Williams. And the quote that I used was a Robin Williams quote when they asked him if he would do a Mork and Mindy reunion. And he says, no, you don't look back if you're trying to go forward or you'll just run into a tree. Oh. Right. So he's like, no, he's not going to go back. But I gave her this quote and she's like, wait a minute. And she turns her camera around. And on the wall behind her camera was a wall of Robin Williams in Mork and Mindy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I was getting all this information, right? And so when I do these private sessions now, I sit down an hour before and I don't have any here that I throw them away right away because they're not my information.
Right.
I don't believe it's morally right for me to keep it. Right. But some of the concepts that come through are fascinating. This one woman, she was a graphic artist, and what got to her was the explanation that she's looking for her pixel instead of seeing the entire screen.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, that's deep stuff there, right? So I'm fascinated. So to me, it's just like coming onto your channel and having us meet and having you say, well, why don't you come onto mine, and how that kind of morphed, how sitting down with a blank sheet of paper in front of me turned into these automatic writings for every session I do. And what happens is I start every session, I read what I wrote, and then we jump off and we go and we talk for however long they booked me for. And we just talk about the experience and we bring them to the place of what is their action step to move forward. Now, how can they take what we just learned, right? And sometimes it's amazing the stuff that comes through. So I think that we're all right where we're supposed to be at the right time, and things are coming through that are in alignment and in resonance with us at the time we're supposed to do it.
Absolutely. And I think that we always say in our classes that you, as a reader, when you start to read, or when you start to read for other people, you always stay in learning mode, because you're going to learn something if you allow yourself to, you're going to learn something every single time, whether it's universal information that comes through, just weird stuff that you're like, oh, I didn't ever think of it that way, or I didn't look, I didn't know that, or personal information for the client that might be relevant for you one day down the line. So it's if you stay in that learning mode, you get to be a better reader. I think sometimes what can happen is when readers get into that mindset of because other people will keeping your ego in check, because other people will say, oh, you did this for me and you did this. And it's that being able to be grateful that information came through for that person to help, but to not lose sight of the fact that you're the instrument, you're the conduit, you're the, that's what you're doing. It's not like you're coming up with all this stuff and you're just brilliant, everything. But I think people can get that confused because we are people. We do come here with, we all have an ego of some kind. And depending on the person, it can be very, challenging, I think,
Right.
sometimes for people to think, well, I know everything now. And it's like, as soon as you start getting into that mode, spirit has a way of putting your ego in check. Oh yeah, you do. No, you don't,
I'm
so like,
I'm
I got that wrong or whatever.
so glad I'm so glad you brought that up, because I don't know if you remember, when we interviewed you, I talked about how humble you are. Right.
Well, thank you.
Well, it's true. And you're talking to somebody who has been around some of the most famous psychics in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I've known big names, and I've known people who are very gifted psychics. And I find that a lot of them are very fragile egoed, very fragile people. And what I also find is in the fragility comes the ego out of balance. They get what I'm saying has got to be true. They're not open to an interpretation or a possibility of something different. And I really think that you have to realize that every piece of information that comes through is coming through a filter, your subconscious mind, and your beliefs, right? And I love how you are very clear about that in the work that you do. I think it's amazing when you run into somebody who's so clear and so well intentioned, because it is very rare in the world, because we're in this world, we are so looking for a place. And a lot of people in looking for their place get lost and suddenly try to grasp power. And when they find something that they can be loved and respected for, right. And then it gets out of hand. So you do have to keep it in check. For me, it's like, if you ever read any of the comments on my YouTube channel, I'm always like, I respect your beliefs. I respect your beliefs, no matter what they are, because spirituality is a personal journey. We each have to come to our own place.
That's right.
But what I find fascinating are the ones who come to you or come to me, probably not to you so much, because you don't claim to be an apostle. Right. But I get false prophet.
Let's add another layer.
Yeah. I get false prophet, and now I'm going to burn in hell. And I get all that deep symbology. And most people don't realize that a couple things. Everybody on earth is channeling the information. I've never met anybody who hasn't at some point said the exact right thing at the right time. Right. Everybody's doing it. What's interesting,
whether they know it or not.
Right. And I think the key really is exactly that, to come to understand it and acknowledge it. Right. And because once you start acknowledging it, then it becomes clearer and becomes more profound. Right. And I think that it's really fascinating that people just don't understand that they already are. They're seeking for something, and it's not about seeking it. It's about acknowledging that you have it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Or remembering basically that you have it, right? Remembering. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. I completely agree with you on that. That's awesome. So you don't do any private sessions anymore, really, but
I do private mentoring, and then I do classes. And so the classes that we do are very interactive. We answer questions. There's always Q&A. There's always sharing experiences and that kind of thing. Right. And we're all learning together. Like I said, I'm always in learning mode. Every class I learn something, every reading I learn something.
I love it.
Yeah. And so I do private mentoring, and it's like I'm transitioning right now. And so, and I just feel the more I do it, the more I realize I've made the right decision. It's always scary to kind of move like, well, I'm doing this, but I did the same thing when I started doing readings. I didn't think I was ever going to do readings. And then people were like, would you do a reading? Would you do a reading? And I thought, well, can I do a reading? I don't know. So I just tried it, and then it was good. And so I did readings for a while, and then I thought, I'll try this. And, you're always growing and changing, just like you would in any kind of career or any kind of phase in life. you have to kind of, we're always evolving. That's what we do. So
well, growth change is always happening. And when you look at it from on a metaphorical sort of situation, when water is flowing downhill and in motion, it's full of oxygen, it's full of life, and it's healthy. But that same water comes at the bottom of the mountain and lands in a puddle, and it becomes poisonous, and bugs start to lay their eggs in it, and even the animals don't drink it.
Right.
Because it's so the only difference was one was in motion and one wasn't. And life is ever changing. And the second you allow yourself to stagnate and not stay in motion and try something new and do something different, then you're actually becoming more and more poisonous. So you have to, explore, like when my first big spiritual experience, which I really want to, and I know, do you have somewhere you have to be after this? Am I at a time frame? Okay. All right.
What am I doing?
There's a question I wanted to ask you, and I totally forgot that I wanted to ask this question. But well, let me go ahead and ask the question because I forgot what train of thought I was on because I kind of sidetracked.
Go ahead.
So when you were young as a child, were you having big metaphysical spiritual experiences before you realized what it was?
So I had a few. The problem when I was a child is that I was in the Mormon church.
Right.
And so yes, I was, but I was using different language to explain it. Right. So as a child, I did see, I did see at one point a little girl that was down our hallway and was kind of waving at me. And I knew instinctively, I was about 5, and I knew instinctively that my family could not see her, but I could. And I also knew instinctively that if I went down the hall and talked to her, things would be different. My life would be different. And I felt like it had something to do with like medium work or something like that. So I didn't. And I knew it was a choice.
Right.
And the other weird thing that I had was I had an obsession with, as a 6-year-old, with a lot of weird spirit. I know that Edgar Casey had a weird experience at 6 years old. So 6 years old must be something. There's a lot of people have these experiences at 6 years old. There was a bed and a mirror across from the bed, and I would jump off, and it was like I was jumping into the mirror. I was very aware that we came from another place, that we were here, but there was something more or somewhere else we came from. It was very apparent to me. And I would be obsessed with doing this, almost like I wanted to jump back there. I wanted to get back there. And so, and at church, I would pray for a question maybe I had, and then I would go to church the next Sunday and my question would be answered. There'd be a talk about it, or somebody would say the right thing to me. So I was having these experiences, but I was ascribing it to different language,
right?
And fitting it into the mold of religion, and then later on, I just figured out it's all the same thing. It's all coming from the same place, the same source. It's just, our vocal cords and the language that we use, we have to put things into sounds and vocal and name stuff and label stuff. And that's what we do. So it's different language that I use now, but it's all the same place and the same stuff. So
exactly. Yeah. My mom had her big out-of-body experience during a mass. So that was a big Catholic religious experience for her.
Right.
Later on in life, I could talk to her about all my stuff and she was totally on board talking to me about it. She was still Catholic, but
right.
But she was more open as she got older. When I was a kid, I love the idea that the 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
I came from a big Catholic family, and at the time when I was 5, there were 6 kids. Eventually, there were 7, but at the time there were 6 kids, and my godparents had a trailer at a park. I grew up in a beach resort, and they had their summer house was a trailer in a park, like a half an hour south of our house in Fenwick Island, Delaware. And they called my parents and said, "Hey, I've heard there were some breakouts down in that trailer park. Will you go down and check on our trailer?" We're like, sure. So they loaded all the kids into the VW bus and we go down the highway. I'm 5 years old. We go down to my godparents' house. Now, I spent tons of time at my godparents' house.
Mhm.
So we get down there. They weren't there, but I knew when I got to my godparents' house, the thing I did as a 5-year-old was I went onto their porch. I opened up the toy box. I got a truck or something. And I went out the door and I go across the street. And it was like, when I say a street, it's like a gravel road in a trailer park in the middle of winter. Nobody's there. And I walk across and there's a little boardwalk and I step off the boardwalk and I play in the sand. So I grabbed my truck and I went and played in the sand. I come back. The trailer's locked. The van is gone. The bus is gone. My family's gone. Right. And I'm now very upset. They forgot me. Right.
Oh my gosh.
They forgot me. Now, to hear the story from my dad's point of view and my mom's point of view, they got 20 minutes up the road. And my dad says, John, you want some ice cream? John, he's not here. They turn around. Mom starts freaking out because right over from where I was another dock that went off into deep water and I couldn't swim.
Oh gosh.
So they're going crazy. So meanwhile, I'm sitting on the steps at my godmother's house. I'm bawling my eyes out.
Oh.
And a little boy walks up to me. He says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You don't worry. They're on their way back." And he sat there and he talked to me. He says, and we just back and forth. He says, "They're here now, so you'll be okay." And he walked around the back of the trailer. As they came around the front of the trailer, they never saw him. Right.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm.
And so I had that experience. And then I was having out of body experience as a child. My mom came out the back door one day and I literally had my G.I. Joe up on a crucifix.
Oh, wow.
I crucified my G.I. Joe. I even wrote King of the Jews in Roman above his head. Interestingly.
Oh, wow. So and it is like those reincarnation stories you hear about kids just kind of doing things that are, that you can't explain. And you're like, how would they know that? Why would they do that? But they laugh. Somewhere in there, it's there.
It's there. And I remember there was one day I was talking to my mom and I said, well, we're named Son of David. And she's like, what? And my father was like, what? I said, well, Davis means son of David. Now, son of David is what they call Jesus, right? And so, right, he was because he was supposedly in the line of kings from King David. And so they called him Son of David. So my father didn't understand. And he thought I was saying I was somebody else's son. But here was this kid saying that we are the Son of David, which I thought was fascinating, right? So I kept having all those kind of really interesting experiences. And then before the psychic started telling me, I was 18, 19 years old, I had a experience where I literally felt the presence of Jeshua and recognized him enough to call him by name.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, before I ever knew anything about my past life stuff. So to me, I was really curious to know about your experiences as a child, because, I think you're very open. I think you're very clear. And I think that doesn't come, I think it comes very naturally for you. And I think if it comes naturally, it probably was there the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it doesn't, like I said, I think it just is it's the same place and it's the same, it's whether or not you can kind of let go of some of those, especially if you grow up in a religion, to let go of some of the unnecessary stuff, the stuff that clutters
the dogma.
it up. Yeah, the dogma. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I had on Spirit Cafe the other day, we interviewed Neil Donald Walsh and from Conversations with God. And there was one question I asked him that I absolutely adored his answer for. I said, so what's next for Neil Donald Walsh? He said, I don't know. I live in the present.
Oh.
And I was like, oh,
a lesson for all of us, right?
Yeah. You deep man, you. By the way, he's a very funny guy. He's a very funny guy. And
Oh,
there's,
really? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
why not? I think I am sure because laughter is such a it's such an anecdote that I am sure that God has a sense of humor.
And I can tell you from memory that Jeshua was an extremely funny
Yeah, I was
guy,
going to say, and Jesus probably did too.
extremely funny guy, and funny at inappropriate moments. And
Right,
like
right.
I told this, told the story about them pushing him up on the cross, and I, you know, it's a it's a emotional thing for me, but it's such a perfect testament to how funny he was and how much he loved everybody else. Because on Golgotha, there's the hillside was a stone, like a stone hill, and they had holes chipped into the hill because they were reusing crosses. They would stand them, and the cross would drop into the hole. Right? They'd lay it down, nail the person on, and push them up, and it would drop into the hole. And they pushed him up, and it dropped into the hole. and he looked at me, and he went like as if to say, "Well, that hurt." right. And it made me laugh and cry at the same time, because it was like,
Right.
Look at this guy making a funny joke without a word,
Right.
at the time when he should be really thinking about himself.
Right.
And instead he was just loving somebody else and making somebody else laugh. And to me, that was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I also think it's really fascinating how you started to have a group where you talk about it weekly, talk spiritual things weekly. Because I did the same thing. I have a membership group. We meet on Mondays on Zoom.
That's great.
And and it's so cool because we don't go there with any concept of what we're going to talk about. Okay? Like sometimes I'll go in, hey, this thing happened, let's talk about that. You know, or somebody will come in with a specific question, and we just sit there and we all give our points of view, and we laugh and we joke and we find, you know, fun stuff within it. But everyone feels so comfortable to just share. We have one person in there who is an expert on the law of one material. And it's fascinating because he talks about all the things I talk about, but in then he adds around it the other stuff that's in the law of one material, which I don't believe in. But we found such a great common ground to speak from and respect each other from. So it was just been very, very lovely. So
yeah, it's so much of this is just about connection and community and finding each other so that we can explore and ponder and contemplate together, and not have someone say, well, that's weird, or why do you
right.
like-minded, so that you feel safe, like safe environments to talk about these things. I think it's so necessary. It's so needed right now, especially in this in a digital world, but also in a world where we've just come through COVID, where people were isolated and apart, and where people move around a lot now. I think it's very important to maintain some kind of community and connection that is, and have those deeper discussions without fear of being labeled weird or odd, or why do you think that, or just to explore, really together.
And it's so funny because, some people will come to you and they'll have their belief very much ingrained in it. But what I find really fascinating is, like, when you look at my channel, I usually get 100% likes, but every so often I'll get a negative, a dislike, or one or two dislikes or something. I always ask those people, well, why did you dislike it? Let's have a conversation. None of them will.
No.
None of them do, because they are invested in what they're right about,
right,
and not open to hearing anything contrary. And so, and I run into that a lot because of the apostle thing. But I get a lot of people who are very invested in that. But one of the things that I find really interesting is we don't realize how subconscious beliefs last, and how they last from generation to generation to generation. Have you ever seen somebody sneeze and said, "God bless you"?
Yes.
Do you know why you do it?
I assume it's conditioning.
Yeah. In the Middle Ages, there was a belief that when you sneezed, you opened your soul to the devil, and the devil would enter your body unless you were blessed. And the original phrase was, "May God bless you and the devil miss you."
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we've been carrying that conditioning of saying "God bless you" after a sneeze for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's like when you tell somebody, you crack a joke on somebody and say, "You pulling my leg?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason you say that is because back in the Middle Ages, when they would hang somebody on the gallows, sometimes their neck wouldn't break, and they had people whose job was to go hang on their legs until they suffocated.
Oh
And
my gosh.
so they thought they were getting away with something,
Right.
and so they pulled their legs. Right.
How interesting.
Yeah, it's so many, like "Ring Around the Rosy, Pocket Full of Posies." That's a plague song.
That's right. That is a plague song.
And
Ashes, ashes. Yep.
you know why their pockets were full of posies? Because the flowers burning smelled better than their flesh.
Oh, interesting.
Right. It's really interesting. These things
That is fascinating.
We carry, and we've been carrying those kind of little conditioned responses, those subconscious responses,
Right.
since the Middle Ages. And it's just really a fascinating thing that we still do that. That's why I'm saying, the whole thing about the clearing the subconscious mind and going back to the base again. I say this: spirituality is a trip you have to unpack for. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's very true. I mean, I think that's why I've been getting so many messages about let things go, forgive people, stop, don't try to let go of the past, let go of grudges. Don't hang on to things.
Right.
But it's the same kind of thing as we're moving into a different phase, and we
Right.
need to prepare for it. And that's the way we prepare, is get rid of the old stuff that's maybe holding us back.
Right.
Holding us down.
I love words. I'm fascinated by words. And the word forgive to me is beautiful because for, meaning before, give. So it's before you give. You have to love before you give, right? So you have to you're giving the love before you get it in return. So you're forgiving. You're forgiving love. And to me, it's one of those beautiful statements of, you have to be the example of love first. A long time ago, I had a lady come to me. She said, in one of my private sessions, she said, "John, I'm ending the relationship with my mom." And I said, "Really? Why?" She says, "Every time we get together, we fight." I go, "Really?" I go, "Well, I'll tell you what, do this for me. Instead of ending your relationship with your mom, the next time you're with your mom and you start fighting, just say, 'Mom, no matter what you do or say, I will always love you.'" She says, "I don't think I can say that." I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I give you permission to do it and say it, but not think it until she gives you a reason to think it." And I didn't run into that lady again for 6 months or so. And I walked into a metaphysical center. She runs up, she hugs me. She says, "Oh my God, I'm so glad to see you." She says, "I have the best relationship with my mother." I said, how'd that happen? She says, "Well, I did exactly what you said." I said, "Well, how'd it go?" She started arguing, we started fighting. I said, "Mom," I took a breath, I relaxed. I said, "Mom, no matter what you do or say, I will always love you." Mom broke down crying, said, "I love you too." We hugged, and it's been the greatest thing ever since. I said, "Do you want to know why that worked?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Because no matter what you do or say, I will always love you is a completely unconditionally loving statement. And both of you just wanted to be loved."
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
But I think it's that simple. I think we have to love first. We have to forgive. We have to forgive, give it before.
Yes.
And it'll come back to us. She didn't have to think it. Just do it and be it. So,
absolutely.
Well, Kim, this has been beautiful. We should do this again sometime. I've loved this.
Absolutely. Yes. You'll have to come on my channel at some point if you can. I don't know if you're too busy now.
I will make time for Kim Carey. That's another thing
Good.
I want to say. We've talked a couple times about private sessions. I'm gonna drop a link below this video for all
Perfect.
For all of your subscribers for $50 off of my readings.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's great.
So
well,
yeah,
I will let them know.
Yeah, I'm just gonna drop it because I anything I can do, So
oh, thank you.
And yeah, you let me know
That's
when.
very kind.
I will be there. We will make it happen whenever you want. You know what we should do? We should do a channeling thing on yours.
I would love that.
Yeah,
I would love to.
If you want to see what that looks like, just go check out one of those videos on my channel.
I will. I absolutely will. So, yeah, let me think on it because I think we could do a really fun episode. So yeah, absolutely. Let me think on that, John. But that sounds great.
That'd be wonderful. All right, so let me tell you, I'm going to put this thing out tomorrow.
All right.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be so much fun. So I just loved having this conversation, and thank you once again for how you kickstarted me back into my work again. Because
you're very welcome. I'm so glad that you did. You're where you belong.
That's exactly what I feel. I've already closed down all of my corporate stuff, and I have one more corporate speech to do, and then I'm done with corporate speaking altogether.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good for you.
I'm pretty excited about it too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you. So guys, this has been an amazing hour and a half. with
hour and a half. Oh my gosh. We know how to talk.
We can talk, but it was such beautiful talk though. That was the best part. And so guys, make sure that you go check out Intuitiveiw. I check it out all the time. I'm always on there Thursday nights, especially. And I go in there and I bother them by saying hello to everybody and messing with people.
This Thursday too, this Thursday at 6:30. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be there, and, but yeah, it's been a wonderful conversation. And you guys make sure you check out Intuitiveiw and all of Kim's stuff and join her membership site. It's really a great community over there. So
thank you, John.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, my friends, for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure that you've subscribed and you like it, you share it, but also comment below it. Let's get this community talking about these topics and spreading this information out far and wide so we can change the world for the better. Thank you.